There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Bad Blind Moms. I'm Bridgit Kenning-Pulpeter.
And I'm Stacy Cervenka, and we're just two moms trying our best and doing it all wrong. Well, tonight we are going to be talking about internalized ableism. And some of you who are watching might not understand exactly what that is. People with disabilities, we are a cross-section of society. We represent all genders, races, ethnicities, religions, geographic locations, political persuasions. And so, and we live in society like everyone else. And so it makes sense that if society has a lot of ableism and a lot of misconceptions and negative thoughts about people with disabilities, that we live in that society and we absorb some of that ourselves. And that impacts how we think of each other, and especially how we think of ourselves. And in the context that we're going to be talking tonight, how we think of ourselves and how we see ourselves as parents. So tonight, joining us, we have special guest, and actually she is our first special guest that is not blind herself. Bridgit and I have decided that we are going to, for our next little while, we're going to concentrate, we're going to talk about moms who have a variety of other disabilities as well, because so many of the parenting challenges we face, it's kind of the same struggle, different difference. So Pauline Victoria, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Stacy and Bridgit, for having me on your show. First of all, my name is Pauline Victoria. I currently live in Hawaii on the Big Island, and I'm originally from the Bay Area in California, where I had my son, and we moved to Hawaii when he was 4 months old. And so we moved together here as a family with me, my husband, our newborn baby, and two stepkids. And since being in Hawaii, I started doing entrepreneurial work. And so I do one-on-one coaching with newbie entrepreneurs and speaking and masterminds.
Cool. And can you tell us a little bit about, whatever you're comfortable with, a little bit about your disability?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I left that part out. So I was born without arms and legs. So technical terms, quadriplegic amputee, but nothing was amputated. I was just born without them. That's the situation I live in.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I think obviously there's really no way that we cannot be impacted by ableism as disabled parents ourselves. I know for me, I put a lot of value on my physicality. I don't often struggle with my blindness as a parent, but since I've developed chronic pain, this has become a real struggle for me, because I think I have to move through the world in a certain way, and that I have to be able to do certain physical things with my kids, and that if I can't, this is somehow a comment, on my ability to parent. I think that's a really big struggle that I have. I'm wondering, Pauline, what are some of the internalized ableism that you deal with as a parent?
Well, when you guys asked me to be part of this show, the term internalized ableism, I was a little not sure of what that meant and what you meant by it. So I actually looked it up. I don't have the definition in front of me directly, but essentially what I learned was internalized ableism is when you feel bad about yourself because of ableist thoughts, so you compare yourself to able-bodied people. And so internalized ableism, I never thought of it that way for myself. And I think, first of all, that's an important note to make, because I think as people with disabilities, we're just going along in our lives and we don't even recognize when something is wrong. And not to make internalized ableism bad, but anything that makes you feel bad about who you are and makes you feel less worthy is not good either. So it's important to take a minute and recognize when that happens. So I'm excited to be able to have that conversation with you guys, and hopefully it helps other people. So for me, internalized ableism, I think it really did show up for me as a mom, because before that, and I think this is where the root of internalized ableism comes, at least for my experience, is I've been so busy in my life trying to keep up with my able-bodied counterparts. And so to keep up, I have to work 10 times harder. And so I'm constantly on this hamster wheel of just making sure that people see me as equal and not less than. And so I think that's where it starts to take root, because I'm already wanting to work harder so I can just be at the equal level as my able-bodied counterparts. So, but that really showed up for me as a mom, because as a mom, it's a personal issue. You have your baby at home, and there's this idea in your head that you feel like, I really want to nurture my baby. You have this romantic almost way of looking at motherhood, the pictures of you holding your baby and everyone looks amazing in this baby, new mom glow as you hold your newborn, and you're breastfeeding. And I couldn't do any of that. And it really was confronting for me to be able to not be able to, when my entire life I had been working at proving that I can do everything. And when it comes to helping my child, I couldn't. And so I took that on as maybe I wasn't made out to be a mom. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but that's something I definitely felt. And that's how I feel like internalized ableism manifested in my life.
Yeah, I think the feeling like you're not adequate enough to be a parent, I definitely, like I said, I've struggled with that in the last 3 years since I've developed chronic pain. Like I didn't really associate it so much when it was just blindness was my disability, because I still had like full range of motion and my body still did certain things. And now, that's becoming, a challenge. And so in the last, especially last year and a half, I've really been like, I'm not a good mom. I'm failing as a mother. And like, I'm still providing them like the same things I always have. I'm still giving them that love and that attention, all those things. I just maybe can't like run around at the park with them as much, or I can't, there's such minor things, but like, I don't know. It's just the way that I kind of internalize it. Like we're at the bounce house and I can't bounce with them on the stuff because I just physically cannot do it. And so it makes me think like, other parents are doing these things in this moment and I'm not. So somehow I might not be a good enough mom. And like I intellectually understand that's not true, but like emotionally, I just feel really like it's been a real struggle, I will tell you, to kind of feel that way, that I'm somehow letting my kids down because I don't always have like the physical abilities that I used to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and you feel, for me, I didn't feel like I was letting my son down. I felt like I was inadequate. Like I wasn't built to be a mom.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny that you say that, because I kind of felt that way when my son was first born. I'd wanted to be a mom my whole life. And then when my son was born, I was just exhausted all the time. I was, I was so tired that I wasn't enjoying anything. I wasn't bonding with my son. I didn't feel connected to him. I was doing all the things that you're supposed to do. I was breastfeeding. I was holding him all the time. And it just made me feel resentful. And I kind of felt like, maybe I'm not meant to be a mother. Like maybe this is all just too much for me psychologically or emotionally, because I have a mental health condition as well. And what I've kind of learned, instead of beating myself up about it, I've learned that in some ways that's my superpower. Like I know what my limits are. I know what my boundaries are, and I have no problem expressing those and, maintaining those boundaries. And then when I do that, I can be a great mom to my kids. Like I have a lot of energy to give my kids, and I have a lot of, emotional and physical energy to give my kids, but it's because I respect my mental health condition and I take care of it. You know, one thing I often think about is internalized ableism is kind of just ableism against ourselves. It's our inner voice saying ableist things to us. It's us holding ourselves up to these ableist standards. So, Pauline, how would you say how do you know when your thoughts about yourself as a mom have kind of gone from healthy, like a healthy assessment of your strengths and weaknesses as a mom and ways that you can improve, how they then go into the unhealthy zone of actual internalized ableism and you beating yourself up for, you know, disability related reasons?
Yeah, I think internalized ableism can go on a spectrum, right? So there's like the negative self-talk to I'll share a story that I feel like it shows very unhealthy ableist thoughts and where it could lead. So like you, Stacy, you said you were starting to feel resentful. So after you have a baby, every woman goes through a lot of hormonal ups and downs. So we're not exempt from that. And so I was going through hormonal ups and downs. In addition to that, I had every feeling in me as a mom that I wanted to nurture my baby. I wanted to hold my baby and rock him to sleep. I wanted to change his diaper. I wanted to feed him. I wanted to bathe him. And the reality of it was I couldn't, and never, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how creative I could get, I would never be able to. And what that led to, which is where it can lead to in the extreme sense, is I felt I'm more than resentful to my son. It was as if he was holding up a reminder moment to moment, you're disabled. Like it was just like, you're not good enough, you're disabled. And I didn't even want him to be around him. And I know a lot of moms go through that naturally just because of the hormonal changes. But I was very aware of who I was and definitely what negative self-talk was happening in my mind in order for me to feel that way. And what I had to come to, and hopefully this will help other people, anytime you start saying, I should, you know, the shoulds, you're going to should all over yourself. When you do that, then you know you're starting to put yourself against a certain standard. Now, whose standard is that? Is the question you need to ask. And really define, is it the standard that I am imposing on myself because of who I am and what I expect of myself? Or is it a standard that society as a whole has placed on me because that's the picture I should be living into? And so being aware of that self-talk, like, well, I should be able to change my baby's diaper. You know, I should be able to rock him to sleep.
And that's the ableist, that's the ableist standards that society has. You know what I mean?
Right. But when, you know, to distinguish whether or not that is a ableist thought or you're, you know, compared because it's, you know, I don't want to say imposed on by society, but maybe unintentionally imposed on by society, because I'm not of the philosophy that society's out to get me. You know, I just think it's just it's in a place of ignorance, and they, you know, people out of ignorance don't think everything through. And how much we internalize that is our responsibility. But it, you know, even as much as I pride myself on being very self-aware and very responsible for my emotions, I fell into the trap myself. And so how to recognize it is, are you saying I should? And is the should from a place of your own personal standards that you self-impose, or is it from a place of society standards? And so that's, you know, I'll share how I pulled myself out of that in a second, but thought maybe if you guys wanted to say anything in addition to that.
Yeah, I like what you said about, you know, trying to decide, is that should coming from an internal place of my own values and goals and morals, or is it coming from society? And, you know, it's okay, I think, to say should when it's coming from you and it's coming from your values and your goals and, you know, the things that are important to you. But when it's coming from out there, you should do this, you should be, you know, you think about moms like, oh, you should have your baby without medication. You should breastfeed. You should use cloth diapers. You should do all these things. That might not come from you. That might come from society. Like, does that come from, is that authentically important to you? Or is that important to the people around you? And I think that's something that all moms have to deal with,
Yeah.
like realizing you get all this stuff as moms of things that you could do and that you should do. And you have to realize, like, I can't do all of it. Which one of these things is, you know, the only way I can say it is which of these things is authentically important to me, like really means something to me, and which am I trying to do just because, like, you know, some random person in a mom's group or my mom or my uncle or my neighbor told me that I should do, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what it comes down to is if you look at what is at the end that you want. As moms, we want to raise, well, I want to raise a healthy son who's in terms of physical, emotional, and mental, right? So I want him to be healthy in all three of those aspects, and spiritual, and I want him to have good character, you know. So is being able to jump around in the playground with him, right, really going to create that character? And so I think as parents with disabilities, you have to start with the end in mind. And when we can focus on the end in mind, then we can determine, okay, this is important, this is not important, this is important, this is not important. And then we won't be so hard on ourselves, because really when we're hard on ourselves, and you mentioned it, I can, like, you know, what are the other moms doing and how are they going to judge me? And I think we kind of play that in our back of our mind, as much as we like to be kind of like, oh, I can rise above it, but we're human. And we do, at some extent, care about what other people think about us. Not to mention this idea, and we won't go into this area, but, you know, could our child, you know, someone report me because they think I can't be good enough to take care of my kid, right? So we have that extra added fear that we also have to consider. But for the most part, you know, maybe it's because I lived in Hawaii. I didn't raise my son in California. I can imagine California is a little bit different. But in Hawaii, every mom, it was like, literally, it takes a village to raise a child. And they're like, oh, I'll take pictures for you, for, you know, or I'll get him his, you know, help him make his snack during snack time, or whatever it was, or we'll put him in the car seat when you pick him up from preschool. So it really was a beautiful experience. And all of those things of other people coming to help is going to build good character in him. So it's going to be a whole other part of his character that other kids don't get, because they don't get to see other people give of themselves so freely.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the nicest things. I think, you know, in the United States in general, mom culture really does put parents on an island. Like, you need to do all this for your kid. You are responsible for all these things. And while to an extent that's true, it's, you know, it's impossible and it's exhausting for parents. And it is, you know, it's unhealthy. Like, we do need community. We do need each other. And I think so many times as people with disabilities, we're, you know, the idea of independence is like rammed down our throats, like independence, independence, independence. And that is good, like, because that's necessary. Like, that's necessary. You need to be able to make choices, and you need to be able to know how you want to live and how you want to get around, and, you know, how you want to, you know, I mean, you need independence. But independence is often about choices. It's about making the choices that work best for you. It's not necessarily about you physically doing something yourself. And, you know, I also think, where is I going with this? Hold on. There was a thing. Hold on, let me. I think that people with disabilities, it's a form of trauma that we don't want other people to help us, and that we feel such shame over people helping us in even small ways. And the idea that you should feel ashamed because you need other people and you want to live in community with other people, like that is a trauma response. And that is something that we as people with disabilities often have. And I mean, I think about here in Nebraska, our neighbors take Leo to school with their kids. His best friend's mom often gives him a ride home if the weather is bad. Usually we'll walk to get him. If not, she'll give him a ride home. There's so many ways that people have helped us that, I mean, when we were really shut down for a few months last year and public transportation wasn't running, we had so many neighbors who would text us and say, I want to let you know that like I'm here for you. If you need something from the grocery store, or you want something from Walgreens, or just let me know if you need anything. And that was so helpful. And that made me feel loved and cared for, not incompetent,
Yeah. Right. And
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
Sorry. I think it's a beautiful opportunity for us to experience that, but it's also an opportunity for able-bodied people who are reaching out to say, if you need help, I'm here, for them to experience that too.
Yeah.
And that's something that I hope, and I would encourage anyone with a disability who's looking at needing help or asking for help as, not comfortable or, as weak, like you're actually stealing that from the world and other people. And that's something that someone said to me.
Yeah.
I felt like I was being an imposition or a burden. And I'm like, oh no, you don't have to do that. And they kind of stopped me firmly. And they said, Pauline, you're taking away the opportunity for me to know myself as someone who can serve another human being. And I thought that was so beautiful because it's this understanding and this ebb and flow of human nature. And like, as someone with a disability, if I saw someone who needed help and I could help them, I wouldn't want to not be able to help them.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it goes both ways.
Yeah. I think too, like, as women, it's also hard for us to ask for help. I know for me it is. Like, even before I was disabled, I've never been comfortable asking for help. And I didn't really grow up in an environment where that was encouraged. And so it is something that to this day, I'm 40 years old and I'm still learning that asking for help is okay. And who doesn't need help, by the way? So when school started, my oldest, he gets a bus because he has an IP and it's part of his services. But my youngest was starting preschool and he did not. And the school's like half a mile from our house. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk him there and back every day. I literally killed myself. The first week I got so sick. I pushed it way too hard. And like that weekend, I couldn't move. I was in so much pain, so much discomfort. And, I was talking to my husband. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, but I felt so bad because, and by the way, I live in Iowa. Nobody's walking their kids to school in Iowa. I'm just saying. But I'm like the disabled parent. And like, if I'm not doing this 100% on my own, like, what are people going to think? And he's like, okay, right. But like, look at you, you can't move now. Like, you're in so much pain. You're sitting here now, you can't like do anything with them on the weekend now because you've pushed yourself because of some, standard you're holding yourself to, getting him to and from school. So we ended up asking the neighbors whose kids go to the same school. And they've been lovely and great about it. And like now, I've developed a friendship with this mom, and like my son who it has a little stranger danger, he gets to be around somebody else besides mom and dad, and is learning to be more comfortable with other adults. And so it just kind of led to opening some opportunities that had I still insisted on, limping my way, walking him to school, and then walking back home every day. Not only was I putting myself through, kind of physical torture, but like it's now kind of led to developing this relationship with this, family.
And I think like this such insistence on, or this fear that we have of, relying or, getting help from other people, it takes its toll on us. physically,
Yeah.
like with what you talked about, Bridgit, when you had chronic pain and chronic fatigue and, you know, you felt like, oh my gosh, I have to walk my kid to school.
Yeah.
It's taking a toll on you physically. It takes a toll on us emotionally and psychologically, because we're like, oh my gosh, I have to do all these things and I can't possibly do them. What's wrong with me? Like, why am I failing? Or, you know, there's like this idea that we can't live in community with other people and we can't be interdependent on other people. It hurts us physically, psychologically, emotionally, pretty much spiritually, every way.
Pauline, once we kind of understand internalized ableism and recognize it in ourselves, what are some steps that we can take to kind of start, you know, combating that internalized ableism?
Well, I think for me, what pops into my mind is don't come at it as like you're fighting something, right? Like an enemy. It's something that you want to just be able to recognize. And then, you know, it's funny, my son takes Aikido and it's the martial art where you use someone else's energy against themselves. And so you kind of just, you know, move your body and move your energy. So it's not about, you know, it's not about like, okay, well, it won or I lost or vice versa. So I never like to come at anything where it's like feeling like a fight, but just an understanding like, oh, I see you. Thank you, but I don't need you right now. And, you know, I wanted to finish up my story about how did I pull myself out from this place of really not wanting my son. I didn't even want to be around him. I didn't want to look at him. I just didn't want to be a mom. It was kind of like, what did I do to myself? And so I think this is hopefully ties it all up together, because what I also said during our time together in this conversation is we have to start with the end in mind. And so how I did it was I had to ask myself, I had to get out of my way, because I realized it wasn't about me. As a mom, it's no longer about me. It was about him. Is he getting taken care of? Is he getting his diapers changed? Is he getting clean? Is he getting fed? Is he getting the sleep he needs? And so I had to move myself out of the way and not get caught up in my negative self-talk and my emotions, which if you allow yourself to get caught up in, can spiral very, very quickly and not be a healthy outcome. So the end of mine was I wanted my son taken care of, because as a mom, that's what we want. We just want to love them. And did it have to be me taking care of him? No, it didn't once I got out of the way. And so, you know, like I said earlier, I want to make sure my son is has a strong sense of who he is and a good character. And, you know, even as he got older, and they do that as they're toddlers or learning to run, where their bodies are going ahead of their feet and they fall down. So they're always falling down. And I couldn't, you know, sweep my son up in my arms and kiss his boo-boo, you know, and make it all better. I had to like use my words to help him get himself up. And, you know, would I have liked to be able to sweep him up and be the hero and take care of him? Of course. That's the nurturing side of us. But by talking him through it to get himself up, that builds character too.
Totally.
So again, it's about, what is your goal as a parent? What is your goal in raising your child who will then become an adult? And allowing you to be able to say, yeah, that's not so important. My son's never going to remember that I didn't change his diapers. You know,
right.
So, you know, so it's, you know, as parents, and we do it, I think every parent has to realize it's not about you anymore. It's about your child.
That's really great. And I think that it also instills some independence in our kids, in giving them some autonomy to make choices for themselves. And I know as like a blind parent, and it depends on the age and all that, but I don't want to have to physically get up and always physically touch my kids to see what they're doing. At some point, I have to trust them. I have a 9-year-old now. He's getting older. He doesn't always want mom physically up in his business. So it's like at some point, I have to give him that space to, make choices, make decisions, and, also make mistakes. It's such a cliche, but it's really true. Like, we do learn from making mistakes. And so I have to kind of let, as you're saying, kind of like, it's not about me anymore. I kind of have to let go of myself and, my thinking, and kind of give him that space to make choices and figure things out. And I think that that's kind of if we're able to do that, I think that can really give our kids a lot of independence.
I had my son say to me one time, and it hurt. It hurt. And it still hurts when I think about it. He said, and he was like maybe 5 or 6, and we started hanging out with other families because we homeschool our son. And so we started going to like social events and kickball and like times where they could play. And so we became friends with other families. And he'd say, I wonder what it's like to live in a normal house.
Aww.
And I'm like, what? Well, what do you mean by that? And he said, where the mom cooks and the mom does the laundry and the mom cleans, and I'm like, well, that's not always the normal house. And we have a different normal. And so, I could have taken on that guilt, but I chose not to, even though it hurt, because you feel like, oh, I'm letting my kid down because I can't cook him dinner. But it's, it's important for us as disabled parents to also be very mindful of what we take on and own and what we don't. And so the guilt doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve us. And so again, I had to navigate him to say, this is our normal. And it's not to compare yourself to other people.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing because it's always hard to tease out what is ableism, what is, genuine either grief or, genuine sadness. And like you said, what are ableist assumptions about, what are ableist messages that we're giving ourselves, like ableist messages that we're telling ourselves, and what are messages that are really genuinely important to us. It's tough for me because I think like there are things that I wish I could do with my kids, but I can't because I'm blind. And that's not always ableism. Like that just sucks, And I think like there's also a spot where I think it's okay to admit that and saying like, I wish I could take my kids on a road trip across the country and like we could pile into that. Like here in Nebraska, that's what everybody does. They get in the car and they go to the Black Hills, they go to Chimney Rock. And my husband and I are both blind. So we can't just hop in the car and, set out across America. We have to have a destination. Like we're going to fly or we're going to take Amtrak, or it's a lot more structured. And that, like, in fact, we're going to Florida next week. And, we kind of have to plan what we're going to do in advance. And like, I kind of am sad that has to be the case. And I think it's okay to be able to say like, I'm sad about that, but that doesn't make me any less of a parent or any less of a disabled person. Like I'm still proud of you to be like I'm still disabled and proud, but I can also sometimes say, man, that sucks. I wish it wasn't that way.
Yeah.
I
think it's being gentle with yourself.
There's ableism, but not every time. Every time we have some sadness about our disabilities, that's not necessarily ableism. Sometimes it's just sucks.
The reality is if we were not disabled, and still parents, we would have hangups as well. So it's just, it's human nature. Yeah.
Yes. But what a beautiful lesson in teaching our kids of acceptance,
Yes.
Sometimes you're given a deck of cards and we accept them and find ways around them and move forward anyway. And so again, that's building our kids' character. And so I feel like it's a gift if you have a disability and you're able to be a parent and, I always am curious what, kids raised by disabled parents, if they did studies on kids raised by able-bodied parents and kids raised by disabled parents, if there would be any difference in the way they think, in the way they, process information. So I think that would be a really cool thing that they do, because, you said in the beginning, Stacy, that's when you were mentioning about your superpower. Well, oh my gosh, well, we get to pass those superpowers on to our children, and that's unique and great. Yeah.
So Pauline, one thing we ask all of our guests is, if you could give, we usually say blind parents, but this time we'll say, if you could give parents with disabilities one piece of advice, and that can include parents with disabilities or people with disabilities who are considering becoming parents, as wide a net as you want, as you're interested in answering, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say give yourself grace. This whole thing about parenting, guess what? No one gets it right, whether you have a disability or not. And guaranteed our kid's going to need counseling,
right?
There's give yourself grace. You're doing the best you can. And eventually they'll realize it, because any guilt that you have, any area where you feel less than, that doesn't serve your child, and it doesn't serve you. So really give yourself the grace and permission to make mistakes, and give them the wrong answers and apologize and all the sorts of things. My son's is 15 now. I don't know how old your kids are, but he's a teenager. And let me tell you, the early years were way easier, even though he can now go to the bathroom himself and feed himself and all of that. The teen years are a completely different animal. And I'm sure I have made so many mistakes, but I am doing my best, and in raising a man who has good character and knows what's important and knows how to serve others and be kind, and and have tolerance. And so hopefully I achieve my mission, but at the end of the day, our kids are their own person, and they're going to do what they do. You can just hope and pray that the seed that you've planted in them take root and they become amazing adults.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Pauline. We appreciate it. And we hope to have you back sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.